Air Force Major Paul Max Moga from Air Combat Command's 1st Fighter Wing, and I fly the world's most advanced combat fighter, the F-22 Raptor.
As the host of Showdown Air Combat, I'm going to take you to a place few people have ever been before. Right into the cockpit as we relive some of the most compelling dogfights of all time. In fact, I'll be flying in a chase plane to describe the action as we reconstruct these epic duels with restored versions of the classic warbirds that fought. We'll also analyze the remarkable technical features, examine the groundbreaking tactics, and get to know the extraordinary pilots who flew these planes on the original missions.
It will be an incredible journey, and I'm going to be your guide every step of the way.
Welcome to Showdown Air Combat.
May 27th, 1944. 33,000 feet above Germany, P-51 Mustang ace Bud Anderson takes on a deadly Me-109. Anderson's ride is considered by many to be the best fighter plane of World War II. But the German pilot drives a new model of 109, one that's even more dangerous than the fighter that's terrorized the skies over Europe for years. In this showdown, Anderson will need everything he's got just to come home alive.
Among all the famous fighter planes in World War II, the P-51 Mustang and the Messerschmitt Me-109 stand near top of the list. The 109 provided the backbone of German fighter forces throughout the war. When the Mustang entered large-scale service in late 1943, it made daylight bombing raids into Germany without excessive losses of reality by providing the first effective long-range fighter escort. These bombing raids touched off some of the most intense fighter battles of the war. German pilots were determined to stop the planes that were destroying virtually every major city in their homeland. American fighter escort pilots were just as resolved to protect the vulnerable bombers and their crews. One of these pilots was Clarence Bud Anderson. He flew his P-51 Mustang against a group of Me-109s in one of the most gut-wrenching dogfights in the Second World War.
August 17th, 1943. 376 U.S. heavy bombers fly a massive strike mission against key German industrial targets in the cities of Schweinfurt and Regensburg. They are escorted by hundreds of P-47 Thunderbolts and British Spitfires. But the escorts lack the range to fly with the bombers all the way to the targets, leaving the heavies unsupported for 2 critical hours. U.S. Air Corps commanders believe that the bombers, with their heavy defensive armament of 50 caliber machine guns, can repel the swarms of attacking German fighters on their own once the escorts leave.
The bombers were being shot down because we didn't have escort fighters that could fly out with the bombers. I think they lost something like 60 bombers. And, you know, that's 600 men went down with those airplanes.
The Germans had really figured out how to defend against the streams of bombers coming over. They would set up and prepare to attack the bombers at the very point at which the fighter escort had to turn back.
It's obvious that a new escort fighter is urgently needed, one with the legs to stay with the heavies all the way to their targets and back. And help is on the way. It's an aircraft that's destined to become one of the most effective fighter planes ever built, the P-51 Mustang.
Well, the P-51 saved the air war in Europe. When we got enough of them, we could actually take the bombers to any target they wanted to go in Europe. The airplane was a tremendous airplane, but it was very fast. It was faster than anything the Germans had. And I think in the hands of a good pilot, the Mustang was very maneuverable too.
It's not a surprise when the number of Mustangs in Europe grows, the German fighter losses mount. On March 3rd, 1944, Bud Anderson makes a personal contribution to the tally when he scores his first victory. By May, he has 5 kills, making him an ace. In the meantime, the continuing losses of planes and pilots puts the Luftwaffe in a desperate situation.
They've lost a lot of their veterans, some of whom have been fighting for 4 or 5 years. Experienced pilots are getting to be fewer and fewer, and that is becoming a real problem for the Luftwaffe at this point.
Even so, the Luftwaffe continues to introduce new fighter models in a last-ditch effort to win back air superiority from the Mustangs. Among them is a variant of the deadly Me109, which has been the backbone of German fighter forces since the beginning of the war. It's designated the Me109G.
The Me109G was a vast improvement over earlier models, but certainly as far as performance goes, the P-51 Mustang could match it evenly in just about every area.
But does this mean that Bud Anderson will have an easy time in his dogfight with the Me109G? Let's take a closer look at the two planes and see how they match up. The North American P-51D Mustang is 32 feet 3 inches long and has a wingspan of 37 feet. Its Packard Merlin V1650 liquid-cooled V12 engine generates 1,695 horsepower, giving it a maximum speed of 437 miles per hour and a ceiling of 41,900 feet. Even though Bud Anderson actually flies a P-51B model during his dogfight, the P-51D has essentially the same performance. As for Anderson's German opponent, the Messerschmitt Me109G is 29 feet 7 inches long, with a span of 32 feet 6 inches. Its Daimler-Benz DB605 inverted V12 pumps out 1,475 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 398 miles per hour and a ceiling of 39,370 feet. So far, it looks like the Mustang has a clear edge in at least one important category: speed, topping the 109G by almost 40 miles per hour. But as we know, there's a lot more to a great fighter plane than raw speed. So let's start digging a little deeper by examining a real P-51.
This is the legendary P-51 Mustang. Originally built for export in 1940 to Great Britain, it was only a moderate success. But when its original Allison engine was replaced with the Rolls-Royce Merlin in April 1942, it quickly became one of the deadliest airplanes in the Allied arsenal.
Getting into the cockpit of this bird is always a great experience for me.
So, Mark, I've been in the cockpit of a Mustang before, but I gotta tell you, man, every time I sit in one of these things, you just get goosebumps thinking about what kind of missions these planes are on back in World War II.
Well, the Mustang has a lot of basic levers in here and so forth. You got your throttle right here. We've got the trim wheels down here. You got aileron, elevator, and rudder trim. You got a flap handle over here, and a real important one right here is this black handle is a landing gear handle, so we don't want to put that up when we're on the ground.
I gotta tell you, one of the things that I think of when I start reading some of the stuff in the cockpit is I look at the landing gear and the flap speeds down here, and 10 degrees of flaps, 400 miles an hour. And you look at the airspeed indicator, and the red line is just above 500 knots, and that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, 505 miles an hour is the never exceed speed in a P-51 airframe.
That is smoking fast.
Yeah, it really is.
And it's got the thick plated glass from the front, I would assume, for defensive purposes.
Yep. Armor plated glass, the thick glass.
And it's got, there's really nowhere to put the plate behind you because it's all open for visibility.
Yeah, they had a small armor plate. This particular airplane doesn't have it, but they had a small armor plate that was right here, and then after that was that fuel tank and some radios, some communication radios.
So just from the way it's laid out, the size of the cockpit, everything, it's built pristinely for fighting.
That's correct.
From my perspective, it looks like Bud Anderson has an absolutely amazing cockpit to drive from. But you haven't seen anything until you've been inside the cockpit of the legendary German warbird, Me109.
Man, it feels like you're sitting in a tank.
Without a doubt, the P-51 Mustang is one of the most dominating fighter planes of its era. But can it live up to the legendary German warfighter, the Me109?
When I think of German aircraft in World War II, I think of one plane, the Messerschmitt Me-109. And today we have the absolute
privilege of being around one of only 3 flying Me-109s in the entire world. Harold, good to meet you, man.
Pleasure meeting you, Max.
So tell me a little bit about this Me-109. I mean, she's in pristine condition. Now, what model is it, and how long did it take you to rebuild it?
It's a G6. The Germans built it in either 43 or 44, and I spent 10.5 years restoring it.
She is just an absolute beauty. So this was basically, for all intents and purposes, pretty much the exact plane that Bud Anderson would have been fighting against all the way back in World War II.
Yes.
The Me-109's power plant that Bud fought against was the classic 1,475 horsepower Daimler-Benz DB605. Unlike the Merlin's more standard V-shaped piston arrangement, the DB605 is an inverted V. Another big difference is the 605's use of direct fuel injection instead of air-breathing carburetors. This allows the 109 to fly upside down, and in other situations, such as nose-over dives, which put negative G's on the plane. With regular carburetors, extended periods of negative G's will interrupt the flow of fuel, causing the engine to quit. Not a good thing if you're yanking and banking to save your life in a dogfight. Besides its innovative power plant, the Me-109 also has a lot of other advanced features. Among the most sophisticated is its internal structure. Now, Harold, you were saying that this plane is about 4,000 pounds lighter than a Mustang that it was fighting against. And, you know, they're roughly the same size, so that weight reduction had to come from somewhere.
Yes, that's because the landing gear is attached to the fuselage. They didn't attach it to the wing because you'd have to build the wing stronger to get to the landing gear for hard landings. There's no fuel tanks in the wing either, so there's nothing in the wing.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the reasons why it was so damn light. So, Harold, like we were talking about, we've got a fairly light plane, got plenty of power, but when it comes down to climbing and turning, it's all in the wing.
Right.
How was this plane as far as climbing performance? I gotta guess it was pretty damn good.
You can't believe it. You point that thing straight up and the power will pull this fuselage up. You know, being 4,000 pounds lighter than a Mustang, you can only imagine.
Yeah, so you can just zoom to the moon and not have to worry about it.
It feels like it's never going to stop, honestly.
Of course, no matter how advanced the fighter is aerodynamically, it's totally worthless without armament. Many 109Gs have their weapons grouped tightly in the nose. These usually consist of 2 heavy 13mm machine guns. It also mounts one far more powerful 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub. With so many guns just off the nose, I'm curious to see the visibility pilots had from the cockpit. I have never sat in a German aircraft before, let alone an Me-109, so this is the first for me. And I'm gonna see if I can get this done without gooning it up. It's a fairly awkward canopy and extremely heavy. Sliding into the seat, it's a tight fit. Tell you what, this is, Harold, this is a little cramped. And I'm not the biggest guy on the planet. And so this is the original condition of the cockpit, size and everything.
That's right. They built it so you don't get slammed around in the thing. It fits like a glove.
I mean, you don't have a whole lot of room to move, to turn around, check your 6 o'clock, or do other things in the cockpit. But if it's shuddering and buffeting and you're getting rattled around, you don't got a whole lot of room to go.
That's right. It'll hold you upright.
You want to help me close the canopy real quick so I can see what it was really like? I'm knocking my head on the top of the plating here, and man, it feels like you're sitting in a tank.
They wanted the pilot low to fit in the fuselage. They didn't want to put a bubble up on top. And you notice how your feet in the rudder pedals are pretty level, your knees aren't up so high?
My feet are almost straight out in front of me when they're sitting on the rudder pedals.
Because your blood won't drain out in their high G condition.
Talk me through the difference between the triggers and the pickle button here.
Yeah, the trigger guard covers the cannon button, so you can't accidentally push the cannon button. So if you flip the trigger over and lock it, then you got a machine gun there, and then the button's free to push on top for the cannon.
Geez, I tell you, I mean, the visibility in this thing sucks. I mean, it really does. You can see okay out the sides. The engine takes up most of your visibility in front of you, so there's not a whole lot of space to look left or right or above.
I had a P-38 pilot. Once he sat into my airplane, he said, I would have been more aggressive. You know, because he didn't know how blind it really was.
Despite the lack of visibility from the cockpit, there's no doubt the Me-109 is a fantastic plane with many advantages. However, by 1944, the Me-109 was starting to become outdated, especially when compared to the P-51 Mustang.
So, Mark, here we are at the venerable Mustang, and I gotta tell you, I've got quite a few flights and a handful of different warbirds, and far and away, my favorite warbird is the Mustang. I love this thing, and just starting off with the wing, it is extremely smooth, and this plane really revolutionized and changed the tide of the war in Europe. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that made that happen, like the wing.
Well, the P-51 Mustang was the first fighter aircraft to incorporate the laminar flow wing design. And what that basically is a real smooth, symmetrical wing foil, basically symmetrical, that allows the air to go over the wing without becoming turbulent towards the end. The highest part of the wing, the thickest part of the wing, is way back here instead of up here like on most traditional wings. It's a little different.
Smoothing the airflow over the wing makes it far more efficient. That means the engine has to do less work and consume less fuel to pull it through the air than a normal wing. Believe it or not, a seemingly small factor like this can actually improve a plane's range by a large percentage. In fact, the Mustang's laminar flow wing is one of the main reasons the plane has a range of well over 1,500 miles with external drop tanks. That's longer by far than any other Allied fighter, making the Mustang ideal to escort U.S. heavy bombers on their deep strike raids into Germany. And of course, the Mustang had the armament to take on a fight with any warbird that got in their way.
B model just had 2 50 caliber machine guns here and here, and then a 2 on the other side for a total of 4. And the later D models had 3 50 caliber machine guns on each wing.
And this is a B or a D?
This is a D right here.
Not surprisingly, one of the main goals of a Mustang driver like Bud Anderson is to stay out of a 109's line of fire. A feature that helps him accomplish this is the P-51's outstanding power plant.
This engine is really something else. So let's go and take a look at that one real quick. What does she have up here?
Well, we have a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine up here. This one's 1,695 horsepower, and it's a V12, as you can see here. 6 exhausts on each side, and in this nice, tightly formed cowl, making it very slick.
Now, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, is there anything behind that name?
Well, it was originally the British who came up with this engine. They had it in their Spitfires, and then when they decided to put the Merlin in the P-51 Mustang, under contract, Packard in the United States started building the Merlin engine.
So different name, but the engine is basically the same as what they had in the Spitfire.
Exactly.
The Mustang isn't generally known for its ruggedness, but I'd still take one into battle any day of the week. I've had the privilege of driving one myself, and take it from me, it's an absolute dream to fly. By 1944, the Mustang is starting to assert itself as master of the skies in Europe. Whereas the Me109 is beginning to show its age, even with constant upgrades like those found in the 109G. This will be a big advantage for Bud Anderson during his dogfight on May 27th. But is that all he needs? Somehow? I don't think so. Even though the P-51 Mustang has some significant technical advantages over the Me109G, the 109 can still be a fearsome opponent. So as usual, a lot will depend on who's in the cockpit. In the case of the Mustang, that pilot is Clarence Bud Anderson.
Well, Bud was born in Northern California, and as a youngster growing up there and working on his parents' fruit farm, he would watch the commercial aircraft that were going east to west and got an early interest in wanting to fly. As soon as he could, he entered college and entered the civilian pilot training program, which was started by President Roosevelt in 1938 as a way to train civilian pilots for the day he was sure would come when we would need more military pilots. Bud took advantage of that, learned how to fly, and on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and in January of 1942, Bud signs up for the Army Air Corps and enlists to be a combat pilot.
During training, Bud demonstrates remarkable mechanical aptitude. This allows him to understand the technical strengths and limitations of his P51 far better than most other Mustang drivers.
He actually learned how to become a mechanic at the same time he was going through pilot training in college. So on he goes, and just a great disposition, but also a very, very determined and intense and dedicated pilot. And that served him well in combat against the very best the Germans had to put up against him.
When Bud Anderson's not escorting bombers, he can often be found in the Squadron Officers Club. Like a lot of fighter jocks, he's known for having an occasional drink, something that's proven by the name he gives to his Mustang.
I tell my non-drinking friends, my Baptist friends, it's named after the most intelligent bird that flies in the sky, the crow. But my drinking buddies all know it's named after that good old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
Although Anderson does like to raise a little hell, once he's in the air, it's all about the job. On escort missions, the tactics he and his fellow Mustang drivers employ are focused on one goal: to prevent German fighters from smoking the heavies.
P-51s typically flew in multiples of flights of 4, and they would layer the fighter formations around the bomber formations. The lowest one would normally be maybe a couple of thousand feet above and behind the bomber formation, and then they would have other fighters layered up to maybe 30,000 feet high, and they would be directly above the bomber formation, a little behind it, or off to the sides. That way they could try to intercept the attackers before they could get to the bombers.
Usually, the German fighters do their best to avoid the escorts, saving their fuel and ammunition to use while attacking the bombers.
You would see them trying to attack the large formations of bombers going into Germany. They would do that en masse. They would get huge formations together, 100, 200, 300 airplanes, and they'd try to hit them all at once in one place.
They normally make a diving pass from high altitude, trying to fly through the escorting fighters before the escorts can track them. They also sometimes form up into large gaggles as many as 50 miles ahead of the bombers, then make mass head-on attacks straight through the American formations.
Head-on attacks were effective because it avoided the escort fighters, and also because of all the high closure rate of the two airplanes coming directly toward each other, it minimized the exposure time that they had to the massive gunfire of the bomber formations.
However, with the large numbers of U.S. escorts by 1944, the Germans cannot ignore them entirely.
It was not uncommon for the Germans to leave part of their fighter force high above the bombers and not attack the bombers to basically attract the attention of the escort fighters, to keep them from attacking the rest of the interceptors who were trying to attack the bombers. And sometimes these high German fighters would attack the escorts.
This is just what happens to Bud Anderson during his escort mission in May 1944. But even though the Me109Gs that pounce him are a serious threat, they still have a couple of important disadvantages compared to the Mustang, ones that will have a direct impact on the tactics their drivers can use.
The P-51's biggest advantage was the fact that it's faster on the straight and level, and also can dive faster than the Me109. So basically the Me109 is trapped. It can't get away. It's going to have to stay and fight, whether it's winning or losing.
This gives Anderson something U.S. fighter pilots call the initiative in combat, which is a huge tactical advantage. Even so, the 109 has at least one edge over the Mustang. At some altitudes, it actually has significantly better climb performance. In other areas, it's a toss-up.
The turn performance was about the same, and which airplane was better in a dogfight would probably depend on the relative fuel loads, how much fuel each one had, because it changes the weight and the turn and the climb performance.
Despite issues like these, however, most experts agree the P-51 Mustang is a better overall fighter plane than the Me109G. So far, our analysis seems to confirm that judgment. But one factor we haven't looked at is the morale of the pilots. Granted, Bud Anderson and his fellow Mustang drivers are defending the bombers and their crews, but the German Messerschmitt pilots are defending their homeland. Could that give the 109 drivers an edge during their dogfight with Anderson in May 1944? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. Get more Showdown Air Combat online.
May 27th, 1944. U.S. fighter pilot Bud Anderson and the rest of the 363rd Squadron's P-51 Mustangs escort a formation of heavy bombers on a raid deep into Germany. The heavy's target is a synthetic fuel plant at Ludwigshafen. Oil is the lifeblood of mechanized combat. With Germany's oil supply being choked off, they've increasingly turned to synthetic fuels to keep their war machine running. Air Force bombers have been pounding these plants for weeks, and the Mustang drivers know the German fighters will be up in force to protect them. Anderson's 51s are at 27,000 feet, high over the bomber stream. So far, they haven't been attacked, but a few miles up ahead, it looks like all hell is breaking loose with the lead bomber squadron.
Bandits, 11 o'clock low.
10 o'clock high. Pick him up. Blue leader, break left.
So we dropped our tanks and poured the power on and swung around and made this tight turn and tried to head up to the front of the bombers.
Bombers in the lead formation are exploding and spiraling down in flames. Here they come. It looks like the German fighters are done working over the lead formation and are heading for the bombers Anderson is escorting. Anderson's squadron makes a sweeping left-hand turn to engage the oncoming bandits. Anderson's Planet 4 is on the outside of the American fighters' turn circles. Being deep on the outside of the turn makes Anderson's section vulnerable to attack as they have a high potential to go belly up to unobserved enemy fighters.
But I look back, and just as I look back, my wingman, Eddie Simpson, calls out, "Hey, we got bogeys coming in from 5 o'clock high."
Anderson looks back over his shoulder, and sure enough, there's a previously unseen element of 4 Me-109s heading straight down the chute towards the Mustangs.
So I reverse my turn, make a defensive turn, and pull hard and go right straight at them. And that put us in a string formation. So we went head on right through them like that.
The 109s hit the merge and blow right through the P-51s. The Mustangs do another 180-degree turn and chase the German fighters down. But instead of running or heading for the bombers, the 109s are turning back towards the Mustangs to engage. I've got to say, this is just a little unusual. The German fighters normally do their best to avoid battle with the escort fighters. But it looks like these guys are more interested in smoking P-51s than B-17s.
I'm making my turn, I'm looking back at them, and they're turning left. They turn left, so we turn left. Now we got 4 Me-109s coming around here and 4 Mustangs coming around here.
Now we got a big daisy chain going with each formation chasing each other's tails. Their throttles wide open. But the 109s have got 2 very big problems. With the Mustang's Merlin engine pumping out over 200 more horsepower than the 109's Daimler-Benz, the P-51 is faster than the 109. And with the thin air at this altitude, the 109's high wing load gives it a reduced turning rate compared to the Mustang. So with each circle in the daisy chain, the P-51s are gaining on the 109s.
After 2 turns at 29,000 feet, each time we gain a little bit on them. They saw that. So they roll out, going straight back into Germany.
The Mustangs go right after them. But one Messerschmitt suddenly climbs up and away from the other 3. Anderson seems concerned about this one. It might end up above him in a perfect position for a high side bounce.
Eddie, this is Bud. Better go after that climbing 109.
Simpson and his wingman break up and away, chasing the climbing Messerschmitt.
So now I got 3 Me-109s and 2 Mustangs on their tail. And the way you get a kill is just get in as close as you can, fire a burst,
He tears loose with a long burst from his Mustang's wing-mounted 50 cals. They pepper the 109 all over the fuselage and wing root. The 109 starts pouring thick black smoke, but the ruggedly built German fighter still keeps flying.
He flipped the airplane over and flies upside down. And I'm sitting up here, you know, comfortably right side up. I have no idea what he was trying to do, but I just pumped some more shells into him, and now he really cuts on fire, and pieces come off, and he starts to slowly disappear, smoking very badly.
That's Bud Anderson's 6th kill of the war. And now it's 2 against 2 as Anderson and Scar continue chasing the remaining pair of 109s. But the German pilots know it's only a matter of time before the bastard P-51s catch up. Suddenly, the trailing Messerschmitt peels away and dives for home. And look at this. The other 109 is pulled into a sharp climbing left turn, braking back to engage the Mustangs.
So now I say, okay, I'm going after the guy that says he wants to fight.
It must be the German flight leader showing some prime-time guts by trying to cover the escape of his wingman. And this one could be trouble. It looks like he can really fly that 109. Anderson and Scar turned inside of the German, trying to set up for a high-angle snapshot. But the 109 pilot pulls harder, passing in front of Anderson at an impossible firing angle. Anderson and his wingman overshoot the German's turn and start a climb, trying to get back above the 109. But the German reverses his turn, trying to fall in behind Anderson and Scar.
And he's going to come after my wingman. And so I told John, I said, you take defensive action, take your airplane down, and I'll cover you.
Scar breaks away, and the 109 goes after him. But Anderson sees it and goes after the 109. With his Mustang's better speed, Anderson closes in on the 109 before it has a chance to close in on Scar. Now what was a battle between scores of fighters has been reduced to one-on-one. It's pilot against pilot and plane against plane. But when you boil it down, this is what air-to-air combat's all about.
I'm coming up behind him. He pulls out, and he comes around in another hard turn. So I'm sitting there again. I said, well, I out-zoomed him last time, I thought, so I'll do that too.
It's a classic defensive break turn. And just as the German pilot planned, Anderson screams by with a massive overshoot.
I cut across his path, pull up very steeply again, and sure enough, he reverses his turn. Now he's coming after me.
It's a perfectly executed reversal. Man, this 109 driver is good. Anderson pulls his P51 into a climb. Now, all Anderson can do is keep pulling the nose of his Mustang up, climbing steeper and steeper, trying to keep the German pilot from getting his nose on him.
I'm getting kind of worried because he's on my tail, and I'm waiting for him to stall, and I'm hoping that my Mustang's got more guts than he has.
Don't forget that at some altitudes, the 109 actually has a better climb rate than the P51.
It had a big cannon that fired through the nose, and I could see that big yellow nose down there trying to get up there. I was thinking about plan B.
Things are getting desperate for Bud Anderson. It's only a matter of time before they each hit their stalling speed and start falling like a box of rocks. If it happens to Anderson's Mustang first, he's a dead man. May 27th, 1944. U.S. Mustang pilot Clarence Bud Anderson may be on the verge of losing his plane and his life. While escorting U.S. bombers on a raid into Germany, Anderson's flight of 4 P-51s was bounced by 4 German Me-109s. Anderson shot down one of them, but he's now on a steep climb trying to evade the last 109, which is almost ready to unload on him. Each plane is at max power, hanging on its prop in near vertical flight. Even though both fighters have powerful engines for the time, neither one can sustain a vertical climb for long. Their airframes shudder and shake as the planes rapidly slow down. Their engines straining against the force of gravity, or what we fighter pilots call God's G. Anderson looks back over his shoulder, hoping the 109 stalls off first. Because if Anderson's 51 stalls before the 109, it will tumble right back into the German sights. But just seconds before the Mustang stalls, the 109's nose begins to drop and he starts falling off.
And he wobbled around, and then he had the rudder off to keep it from stalling. So, boom, I come right back on his tail again.
Anderson's 51 has done it again. Anderson flops his plane over and goes after him hard. Since the 109 has a head start, he's out of firing range. Yet in addition to all the other great qualities, the Mustang is excellent in a dive, and Anderson quickly closes in. But this 109 driver isn't done. He comes around hard to the left and starts climbing like he wants to come at Anderson head on again. This guy's not only a great stick, but he's got a ton of guts. We've got to know that Anderson has a better plane, but he's still coming back for more. Now this is the mental part of combat that's difficult to explain unless you've experienced it firsthand. The stress is so intense that it's not always the pilot with the best plane who wins the dogfight, but rather it's the pilot who gives up first mentally that loses. Clearly this 109 driver hasn't given up yet, but neither has Anderson. He could just use his Mustang's better speed to continue his dive and head for home. But instead, he rolls the dice and turns hard left himself, trying to get his nose on the lead of the 109 and get a high-angle snapshot.
He comes around this same hard turn. I'm in almost the same position. I didn't want to be up there in front of that guy again, so I thought, I'm going to try to cut inside of it and see if I can make this turn.
Anderson's really taking a big chance here. He's going to lose a lot of speed in this turn. And if he doesn't smoke the German on this next shot, he'll be in an extremely vulnerable position.
What I didn't want to do was lose all my energy and lose his speed and let him get around on my tail. So I was very cautious about it. I wanted to keep my power up and not sacrifice my energy too much.
And look at this. Anderson's dropped his flaps 10%. This is actually a fairly common procedure used by the more experienced P-51 drivers to tighten their turns and slow air speeds in combat. While not tech order, it certainly gets the job done.
So I start to pull the nose in. It looks like I'm going to make it.
The nose of Anderson's Mustang slowly starts coming up and around to the left. Anderson's done it. His nose is lead on the 109 and nearly the mallet gun solution. But before he can fire, the 109 breaks up into a steep climb.
He screwed up really, and he straightened his airplane out and then tried to out-zoom me.
Anderson pulls up and follows him. And here we go again. Both planes are at max power in a near vertical climb, except this time it's the Mustang chasing the 109. Having just gone through the same maneuver a couple minutes ago, Anderson knows the 109 can't hang on his prop as long as the Mustang. It's just a matter of time before the Messerschmitt stalls out and comes right back into his sights. This is a huge mistake by the 109 driver. The 109 starts to shudder and slow down. He's a sitting duck. Anderson closes in for the kill.
Gave him a little lead, fired a burst. Saw a tracer go over his right wing, gave it a little bit of left rudder. That brought the shells right into the middle of the airplane. Got strikes all over him, smoke, coolant, white, gray coming out. And he's going up like that. The prop stopped. I quit firing.
Pieces fly off of the new German plane as it starts to smoke and flame.
I went right alongside of him, and then he just rolled over like this, and from 29,000 feet, he went right straight down. I followed him down to 20,000 feet, and I was going faster than I'd ever been in my life, going too fast. I come off the throttle and kind of leveled out and made some big spirals following him. He was leaving a tremendous trail of smoke, just black for a mile and a half long. And he's going straight down. Pretty soon I see his shadow coming in, and he and his shadow met on the ground, and just tremendous explosion.
Bud Anderson is notched his second kill of the day.
And man, I tell you, that was a exhilarating moment. And you're so happy that you survived the thing more than anything else, not shooting down somebody, just the survival of it. Tell you what, I can close my eyes and look over my left shoulder. I can still see the nose of that Me109.
As he heads for home, Anderson doesn't even bother wondering why the German pilot made his last fatal error. Did he finally crack under the pressure? He certainly had other options besides the one that he chose. And you know, we'll never know for sure. That's the way it is in a dogfight. Things happen so fast that you can be a hero 1 second and dead the next. But for Bud Anderson, it feels pretty damn good being the hero, at least for today.
Following his dogfight with the 109s, Bud Anderson continues to fly escort missions over Germany, racking up victories against the Luftwaffe. He goes through several different Mustangs, all of them named Old Crow. Yet remarkably, Bud comes through the war completely unscathed, surviving 116 combat missions without ever being hit by enemy fire. He ends the war as the 357th Fighter Group's third leading ace with 16 1/4 aerial victories. But Bud Anderson's not done yet.
He goes on to become a test pilot and worked on a number of unique and memorable programs out of Wright-Patterson and later Muroc, which becomes Edwards Air Force Base. When the Vietnam War breaks out, Bud goes back into combat and flies over 25 missions in the F-105 Thunder Chief in combat. And that is remarkable in its own right, but bear in mind, this is at the age of 48.
Decorated 25 times for his service to the United States, Bud Anderson finally retires from the Air Force in 1972 with the rank of full colonel. During his career, he flies more than 100 types of aircraft and logs over 7,000 hours as a pilot.
And yet the kid from rural California with a love of flying still has not lost the bug. In fact, when Colonel Anderson found out that we were in Northern California filming this episode, he decided to hop in his Cessna, come on up, and pay us a visit. And here he is. Hey, sir.
Hi, Mike.
It's great to see you again.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out. What a treat for the show, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think? I mean,
wow.
there she is.
Looks pretty mean to me.
I bet it looked even meaner when you were fighting it tooth and nail over the skies of Germany, huh?
Oh, yeah. Golly. Yeah.
And to have you here today for just a few minutes to be able to talk to you and find out what it was really like from the guy that was in the cockpit during the thing, it is awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, well, the old Me109s, I saw a lot of them. They were a pretty formidable enemy with, in the hands of a good pilot.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, like we've been talking about it, planes are planes, but it comes down to the guy sitting in the cockpit, you know, the monkey in the cockpit.
I think so. I think especially in the European theater, I think the airplanes were closer to performance, the enemy and the Allies, than they were in the Pacific. And I think the cockpit made the difference.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, so, I mean, standing next to her in pretty much original condition and very similar to the one that you were gunning, you know, just probably seems like just a few years ago. Is the hair standing up on the back of your neck a little bit?
Well, I sure can remember it. It's an exciting time.
You know, I gotta tell you, sir, just from my heart, to have you out here next to this plane and to be around a guy that was there, did that, and is a great warrior and, you know, one of the greatest fighter pilots this country's ever seen. It is a true honor and one of my childhood heroes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming out, sir.
The dogfight between Bud Anderson's P-51 and the Me109 on May 27th, 1944, didn't change the tide of the air campaign in Europe. It was just one of many others like it. But when taken together, these aerial battles had a huge effect on the outcome of the war. By making it possible for U.S. bombers to complete their missions without prohibitive losses, the escort pilots helped shorten the conflict, saving thousands of Allied lives. I'm Major Paul Moga. I'll see you next time on Showdown Air Combat.